I've been to Cancun twice, and honestly, I think it's a little overrated unless you're doing the all-inclusive experience. But Isla Mujeres, that was absolutely worth it. Stay with me and I'll tell you why. So both times I flew into the Cancun airport from the US, and arriving there was pretty smooth and fine for me. You'll see here that I saw a Bubba Gump restaurant inside of the airport, which was kind of surprising to me. And then another one, Ai Wei, which is a taco spot, and I thought that that was funny, so worth including. One thing I definitely wanted to make sure to mention is that I took the ADO or ADO bus both times, and I highly recommend it. The first trip, I took it from the airport to the resort and back. The second trip, I took it from the airport to Playa del Carmen, and we'll talk about that in another video. It was air conditioned, comfortable, inexpensive, and just really easy. On the second trip, they had bathrooms, TVs, and they let us bring drinks on. So overall, I had a really good experience with it both times. So my first Cancun trip, as I mentioned, I stayed in an all-inclusive resort for about 4 or 5 days. Had a really great experience. Everything was included, even the room service, tips. They tell you don't tip. Everything is included in what you're paying. So once you got there, you really didn't need to carry anything around as far as cards or cash, unless you were, going to go to the gift shop or something like that, or go off site. Um, and everything just felt really easy. I could just get up, go grab coffee at the cafe. They even had an ice cream shop, multiple restaurants on site. They even had their own club. Really nice pool at the swim up bar right near my room. And I did check it out. We hung there for a bit, but honestly, I preferred exploring the area and being on the beach. Now, I did check out the club on the resort, and it was actually really cool. They played a variety of music, mostly in English. It was packed, people were dancing, the vibe was really cool. They had a bar, room to dance, some tables. They kind of kept it dark and had lots of colored lights, which was cool. So, total nightlife thing, and free margaritas never hurt, right? Now, you really didn't have to leave this resort unless you wanted to do something specific, like going to the ruins, taking a tour. Um, since it was kind of out of the way, going off site to stores or other places took more effort. So it's about, I want to say from the airport, like a 45 minute bus ride. So having everything right there made a big difference. The staff were cool. It was also my first time seeing iguanas live just roaming around, so that was cool as well. And that trip also, when we went off of the resort, was to go snorkeling. That was the only time I left, and I had so much fun doing that. It was my first time. I was terrified to jump off of the boat into open water at first, but then I was the last one to get back onto the boat because I didn't want to leave the water. So I would definitely do that again. And one thing just to note, that you take a catamaran to the actual ferry, and a lot of people get seasick. Some people in my group definitely did, so it's just something to keep in mind. I was okay, but worth mentioning. Now, on my second trip, I went was after COVID. The first one was pre-COVID. And this was a completely different trip because I stayed in a regular hotel, not an all-inclusive resort. Still had a good time, but it gave me a completely different perspective. Okay. Now, my only real complaint from that trip was I paid for a hotel shuttle. They took about like 2 hours past the reserved time. It was frustrating. And they originally offered me a free ride to make up for it, but later kind of reneged on that. So it wasn't, enough to ruin the trip, but it was definitely annoying. And then I also toured a major resort. Not going to go into the name and all the details because I really don't want to promote them. The views were gorgeous, but the staff were not friendly. So based on that experience, I wouldn't recommend it. Like I said, I won't go into all of that in this video, but if you guys want a separate video on that experience, definitely let me know. Like I said, it is a major resort there. And now to my favorite part of that second trip, by far, was the whole Isla Mujeres experience. Isla Mujeres had a much more relaxed, true island vibe. The water was super clear, warm, beautiful. The pictures don't even do it justice. And it just felt different than the main Cancun area. So I would definitely go back to the island and explore more. And one thing I really loved there was the energy of the people. Everyone was super cool, walking around. Almost every store we passed was inviting people in, not in a like aggressive, pushy way, and like in some areas. But you know, they'd offer you a free snack, drink. Most of the time it was shots, and they were actually free. Because in other places, sometimes they say that, and it's not really. It's just kind of to lure you in. But not in my experience on the island anyway. And you could tell they wanted your business, but the vibe was very welcoming instead of overwhelming. And then another fun part as well, and I want to recommend a spot called Asia Caribe or Asia Caribe. And it's a really cool mix of Yucatecan and Asian food. I had sushi and drinks there. I'm pretty picky when it comes to sushi, but there, at least in that spot on the island, I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. So if you're looking for a cool place to sit, have drinks, and some good food, there it is. And another fun part too, you can also rent a golf cart pretty cheap and drive around the island, which makes it even more fun to explore at your own pace. So overall, Cancun itself reminded me of Vegas by the sea. It's fun, it's beautiful, there's definitely a lot to do, especially nightlife. But for me, it felt more like a place to visit and have fun, maybe do a girls' trip, than it was a place to settle down. I also think it can be a little overrated unless you're doing the all inclusive experience, because that really was a big part of what made the first trip so enjoyable for me. And if you're going, I highly recommend visit Isla Mujeres. That made the second trip totally. I mean, that was my most memorable part of it. Also, Cancun is more expensive than a lot of other places in Mexico, so that's something to keep in mind, especially when it comes to taxis. And like with any tourist destination, you know, use common sense, exercise caution, you know, do your research ahead of time. But overall, I had good experiences in Cancun. And like I said, my highlights were the snorkeling and then going to Isla Mujeres. Those are the parts I love the most and I would absolutely do again. Now, if you're wondering about Playa del Carmen, I have been there too, and I got a video on that coming up, so stay tuned.